Today's presentation is about managing flex work and work-life boundaries. This is the third installment of this series, Hybrid and Remote Work at the University of Kentucky. My name is Azetta Beatty. I'm the HR manager in the Office of Work Life. So as we start our presentation today, we start to talk about boundaries, and we know that boundaries look different for different people, and it means different things to different people. So we want to start off by just a few definitions. So for one, a boundary is a limit or space between you and the other person, a clear space where you begin and the other person ends. The purpose of setting a boundary, a healthy boundary, is to protect and to take care of you. So when you think about the world of work, oftentimes one of the main reasons we need to set boundaries is to let other people know what we need and also be clear on others' expectations of us. And by setting boundaries, we often realize that we really are taking care of ourselves. Another way to think about boundaries is just thinking purely work boundaries. So work boundaries are the physical and emotional, mental limits you create to protect yourself from overcommitting. So oftentimes we hear from employees that they find themselves overcommitting their time, overcommitting their energy, overcommitting to projects, saying yes when they probably should say no, not now, saying yes when they probably should say no, thank you, saying yes out of a mindset of commitment or a mindset of obligation. But oftentimes they find themselves really exhausted, tired, frustrated, even angry because they're overcommitted. So being used, sometimes a person may feel like they're being used or otherwise. Boundaries also separate what you think and feel from the thoughts and feelings of others. So boundaries sometimes simply just let you know what you think and what you believe and what others believe. Also, boundaries fall on a spectrum between overly porous and too rigid. So sometimes when you're setting those boundaries, you don't want to be so tight with the boundary that you can't be flexible, especially when it comes to the workspace. So for example, if you work in a role where normally you are supposed to get off work at 5 o'clock, but this particular day there's a project or there's an activity coming up and your department says, can you work till 6 to help assist with this? Maybe not be so rigid that you can't do it. Now, obviously, if you absolutely cannot do it, then communicate that to your leadership and your team and explain the details there as much as you can. But don't be so strict with your boundaries that you can't be flexible and get the work done that needs to get done. So also keep in mind a healthy boundary is a flexible one that allows you to exercise control over what you let in or allow, but does not make you overly defensive or resistant to change. So when you're creating healthy boundaries at work, sometimes people feel like that's difficult to do. We've heard from employees that sometimes they feel like they have to say yes, or they feel like they must check emails after work hours or on weekends, or they must respond to emails. So when you think about the healthy boundaries at work, sometimes it can feel difficult, but one thing we want you to think about with these boundaries is when you're setting these boundaries, what part of creating healthy boundaries is within your control? What part of it is you making a decision to overcommit? And what part of it is someone asking you or requiring you to do something? And when we pause and think about that, oftentimes we discover that we actually have more control than we think when it comes to boundaries. So remember, with clear communication and practice, you can learn how to set self-honoring boundaries or limits without alienating people or losing out on work opportunities. So I do want you to pause and think a little bit about these questions for your own sake. Do you have trouble setting boundaries? And what does that look like for you? Are you not setting boundaries because you feel like you're going to miss out on something, whether it be an opportunity or just a conversation or spending time with colleagues or being seen as a person that contributes. Like what does that look like for you? Are your boundary issues related to work or home or everywhere? Are they related to community outreach activities? What is it related to? That's something to think about. And how has your flexible work schedule impacted how you set boundaries? How has it impacted it? So that's something to think about. So what can happen when you don't set healthy boundaries? This is something to think about. When you don't set healthy boundaries, things can go awry. For example, you may find yourself experiencing an undue amount of anxiety or stress or depression or sleep difficulty. You may find yourself feeling overwhelmed, burned out, unappreciated. You may find yourself getting to the place where you just dislike your job, your coworkers, or your supervisor because you are not setting appropriate boundaries or sticking with boundaries that you have set. You may find yourself just not wanting to go to work. You may even want to quit. You may also be experiencing some grief because you haven't set these boundaries. So when you haven't set boundaries and it negatively impact you, you may feel like, oh gosh, I've lost control of this job or this opportunity. And you may be grieving what you thought your job was going to be, or what you thought that relationship or that commitment was going to be, because you haven't set appropriate boundaries. And then, of course, another thing that can happen when you don't set healthy boundaries is you can simply not have appropriate priorities in the best order. So you may be the people that you say mean the most to you, you may find they're getting the least out of you because you have so many other priorities that you are neglecting family, friends, pets, hobbies, interests. You may have things that you may, for example, let's say you like to hike and you normally will try to hike at least once a month, but you look at your calendar and you realize I haven't hiked in 6 months. But that's a really big interest and hobby of yours, and that's how you de-stress and that's how you relax and so forth. So that's a self-care opportunity, and you find that you haven't done it. Or maybe you really enjoy spending time with family and friends or even colleagues, and you find that you look up and you haven't spent any time with them in the last several months. You haven't even had a phone call with them for more than 5 minutes. And you may think, oh my gosh, I am prioritizing so many things and I'm spending so much time and effort and energy on these things that really should be more of a low priority in the big scheme of things. So that's something to think about. So other things to consider when it comes to healthy boundaries. Healthy boundaries can help you in many, many ways when it comes to your self-care. They help you take care of yourself, because when you set boundaries and you put in things that mean something to you, things that help you take care of yourself, things that help you relax, things that help you laugh and smile and enjoy life, that's you taking care of yourself. Setting healthy boundaries also help you to be generous with others, have healthy relationships, know your own limitations. You can pause, and when someone asks you to do something and you know that you literally should not say yes to that because you are considering, okay, if I do this, here's the consequences. You are setting limits that make sense for you. They also help you to ask for help when you need it. So when you know that you're at your boundary space, say, for example, you already are working on 5 projects and someone said, can you help me with this? And they may be asking out of a place of admiration. Maybe they know you're really good at this particular type of work, or you're really good at this project, or you always have great ideas, and you may really want to help, but you need to communicate with them at that time and say, I would love to help you if I can connect with you later in the week. Maybe you don't need to do it at that very moment. Or if they say, oh no, this is due in 2 days, and you say, you know what, maybe we can take a walk and talk, and we can talk a little bit about it during that time. I mean, think of a way maybe where you can help, but you're not overcommitting. And then also use your time well. And then feel when you use your time well and you set healthy boundaries, you also tend to feel more relaxed and you simply are enjoying life. So what do you need to set boundaries? In order to set boundaries, you need awareness of the issue or the concern. So for example, if you are feeling stress or strain to, or an obligation even to answer emails all times of day and night, then that's a concern. That is your concern. If you are needing to set some boundaries, but you are feeling like you are always being asked to do more and more and more, and because of that, you're not doing your best work, that is a concern. Okay. And then also being aware of your needs and the expectations that others have of you. This is why you need to set boundaries. You also set boundaries so that you can have a good way to communicate your needs. Really need to communicate your needs in a really good way. And that's going to mean different things to different people. Some of that may even relate to the people you need to communicate with. So if you're working with people that are working various schedules, various hours, various locations, the best way to communicate might be to send an email to everyone. Or it could be send in the same email somewhat, but crafted specifically to that person, that one person, if it's a small group, or if that person's impact on your work is different than someone else's impact on your work. That might take a little time, but it's worth communicating effectively, and it's also worth repeating. So if you send out something at the beginning of the month saying, my schedule for the month looks like this, and I won't be able to take on any extra projects because of this. And 2 weeks in a month, when you get a request to take on an extra project, you can refer back to that and say, remember when I emailed and said that because I have these certain projects I'm focusing on, I can't take any additional projects this month. The person can say, oh, that's right, you said that. Or maybe you can give them a quick consultation, or you can refer them to someone else that can help, or you can delegate in some way. But communicating is really critical. So what does it look like for hybrid or remote workers? You'll find that boundaries for hybrid and remote workers look very similar to boundaries for people that are working on site every day. With every position and every role, each person always has to evaluate their specific job, their specific role, their specific team, who they serve, what they do. Always you have to look at that when you're setting boundaries and when you're just thinking about being effective and efficient in your work. So that's foundational. When it comes to this boundaries piece, so in addition, when you're thinking about hybrid and remote workers, it's helpful if you can just maintain a regular schedule or work location and try not to change it up a lot. So for example, if you are set to be on site on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and you are constantly coming on to site, other days where you're not supposed to be here, especially if it's your choice. If it's your choice and you're okay with it, that's perfectly fine. If it's your choice and it's not interfering with someone else's work or workspace, that's perfectly fine. But if you are choosing to do that and you're not, that's a decision that you can change. Also, if someone is asking you to come in, ask them to give you notice. Ask specifically, can you at least give me a couple of days notice because I have to make some adjustments in order to come in. So sometimes just communicating that can be critical. Also remember to start and end your workday on time. On time is going to be based on your work schedule, of course. And that does not mean that you can't start an hour early if you're working remotely, because you can. So for example, if you're working remotely and you normally will start at 8, but you're thinking, I actually can start at 7 because I don't have to commute and I can sit down in my workstation at home and start working at 7. That is something you can discuss with your supervisor and ask, you know what, since I can't, can I just start at 7 on days when I work from home? As an example. Or maybe you need to flex your schedule in other ways, but definitely have a conversation about it. And then, of course, use your remote work time for work tasks. That does not mean that you can't put a load of laundry in. That doesn't mean you can't cook yourself lunch or go for a walk or something like that. You always get a lunch break and a couple of breaks for your workday if it's a full-time workday. If it's part-time workday, you still get at least a 30-minute lunch break. So, definitely it helps you with your boundaries, even when you're at work, not to be distracted by other things that's not work related when you're working from home. So just make sure you set boundaries. And that could be something as simple as having a work location or workstation at home, and all of your work items are in that space so that when you need them, it's easily accessible. You're not spending and wasting 30 minutes looking for something. So there's some things to think about there. Don't overcommit to appear busy. Don't just keep saying, yes, I'll do things. Yes, I'll do. And then you're working till 8 o'clock at night, 3 nights a week because you've overcommitted. If you find yourself in that space, that's a good time also to pause, take a look at all of the things you have to do, assess how long it's going to take, assess if you need assistance. So if you need to delegate, if you need to ask for help, then do that. And then also when you're working in a hybrid and remote work schedule, focus on your tasks completed. If necessary, track your progress. So these 5 steps to creating productive work boundaries are really helpful and really good to think about when you're talking about workplace boundaries. For one, choose boundaries over barriers. 2, figure out how you do your own best work first. 3, put yourself in your teammates' shoes. 4, make agreements in terms of the team's greater good. 5, give based on long-term benefit, not short-term fears. So let's go back and break this down a bit. So the first one said, choose boundaries over barriers. When you talk about barriers, oftentimes you're envisioning or you are walling off communication, like you're putting up a wall. I'm not going to talk to that person. I'm not going to communicate with them. I've told them once, I'm not going to tell them again. Those are barriers. So we're talking about boundaries, not barriers. So boundaries are for making responsibilities and agreements clear. That's for you. Boundaries help you clearly communicate what you need, what's working, what's not working, what support you need. That's what a boundary is. It's a helping tool, not a hurting tool. Also, number 2, figure out how you do your own work best first, your best work first. So boundaries should help you take more control and therefore more responsibility. Know what you need in order to do that. So know what you need in order to take on control and responsibility for your own work. So figuring out what helps me do a good job, basically. What does that look like? Does it help me to do a good job to start an hour early? Does it help me to do a good job to have a planner? Does it help me to do a good job to write a to-do list at the top of my calendar every week? What helps you to do a good job? And then also, number 3, put yourself in your teammates' shoes. For people to respect your boundaries, they must know you understand what they're up against and that you care about them. So put yourself in someone else's shoes. So basically, try to understand what boundaries your teammates, your coworkers, your department, your division, what are their boundaries as well? How can you support them? How can you guys maybe even exchange some things if necessary? So just showing some empathy for people can go a long ways. And then number 4, make agreements in terms of team's greater good. Setting healthy boundaries is not about defending yourself. It's about making if then agreements that smooth the path for your collective success. So basically, when someone asks you to do something, you're like, I can do this if this takes place. So if I have, maybe for example, if I don't have to go to these 3 meetings this week or today even, I can help you tomorrow with this because I can finish up the work I'm doing, or I can help you with this project tomorrow if I don't have to do something else later this week. So that kind of if then agreement can be helpful. And then give based on long-term benefit, not short-term fears. It's easiest to set and stick to boundaries when you frame them in terms of the big picture. So big picture, you're trying to stick to the boundaries that you have set. For example, you've said, I am not going to check emails after 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock. When I leave work, I am not going to check emails, as an example, right? I'm not going to email people over the weekend asking for things or even answering their emails. So think about the big picture. In the short term, you maybe say, oh, it's not a big deal. I can do that. In the short term, you may say, you know what, I can work this extra 30 minutes or an hour. But in the long term, could you potentially be setting up a habit that is going to hurt you in the long term? Have you been answering emails on the weekends and now therefore in the long term, people are expecting you to answer emails in the evening, although you've said you don't want to do that? So that's what that's kind of talking about. So here's some things to think about how boundaries can look. Some examples. So a boundary can be turning off notifications outside of work hours. So like, for example, making sure if you're working from home, making sure your computer's turned off, making sure your email is off, making sure you've closed up and put away your laptop so that you don't hear those if you have the chiming, beeping email notifications, or if you have it on your phone, turn it off after work hours. Allowing yourself to take a normal lunch break. I know that can be a challenge when you feel like you have a lot to do and you can just work through lunch and you can maybe eat a 15 minutes lunch, and that is not the policy for UK. You're supposed to take a minimum of a 30-minute lunch. So take a normal lunch break. That's part of you taking care of yourself, even if part of that time is you taking a walk around the block. Take a normal lunch break. This is you setting boundaries that I will take care of myself. And in the long run, you appreciate it. In the long run, you may be able to be that much more efficient when you're working on your projects because you're not so tired, you're not so burned out. Communicating workload concerns. When you have concerns with your workload, communicate that early. Don't wait until the day before this project is due and you've been struggling all week with it and you have not said anything to anyone. So on Tuesday, when you realize, I don't think I'm going to get this done by Friday and I need some help, Tuesday is the day to ask for help, or Wednesday morning. And it could be that someone is happy to help you, happy to assist you, and maybe you can return the favor one day. Other things when it comes to boundaries, things, how they can look. I'll handle this tomorrow morning. That's something you can say to yourself. I'll handle this tomorrow morning. And you can make a little to-do note or to-do list at the end of the day, at the end of every day of things I need to do first thing in the morning. Put it on your calendar, write it, handwrite it, what have you, whatever works for you. But give yourself permission to say, I will handle this tomorrow, or I will handle this Tuesday. Set the boundary. And then thanks for the reminder. If someone asks you for something, say, thanks for the reminder. I'll get to this as soon as I can. One reason you may need to say, I'll get to it as soon as I can versus I'll get to it Tuesday or I'll get to it Wednesday. Let's just say something else comes up, or the project you're working on, you thought you would have had done at the end of the day. You don't have it done at the end of the day. So now you have to take the next day to do it. So if you at least said, I'll get to it as soon as I can, that's a good way. Or you may say by the end of the week, or you may ask the person, when is this due? Or when do you absolutely need this? And if you find out that they need it at a time that you can't do it, you may ask for help. So what boundaries at work look like? What boundaries at work look like? So some of these statements are interesting. Some of them I'm not 100% sure I would say, but it's an idea just the same. So the first one says, I'm not comfortable talking about this. Please do not bring it up again. That's something you can say if you're comfortable saying it, or you can say it a different way. You can definitely say, I'm not comfortable talking about this at work, and leave it at that. You can also say, I cannot stay past 5 p.m. on Wednesday because I have to take my son on to his karate class. This is just a very specific example. Basically, what this is saying is if you have a commitment, post-work commitment, or even weekend, if you are being called in to do work or someone's reaching out to you, if you know that you cannot work past a certain time on a certain day, let's just say you normally do, or sometimes it's flexible and people know that it's flexible sometimes, I would say just go ahead and let people know in advance. For the next 6 Wednesdays, for example, I have to leave at 5, I can't be late, or I can never work late on Wednesdays. Just make that known and remind people if necessary. When I'm on vacation, I will not be available. That's something you can say also before you leave for vacation, just in case. And if that's the case, you may tell your team or your supervisor who they can reach out to for certain things. So I've seen people oftentimes use their outgoing email message for that. They may say, I'm out of the office until a certain date. And they may say, if you need help with fill in a blank, contact this person. Or there may even be several names and several phone numbers in that email because it's related to different things. That's a great way to set boundaries where you don't feel obligated to be checking email, thinking something's going to fall through the cracks or someone's going to miss something because you're not available. And of course, talk to someone, your teammate, your supervisor, find out who can cover certain things for you that you know may come up, may need to be covered while you're out. And this last one says, I know it's important to stay on top of work emails, but it's also important for my mental health to unplug on the weekends. So I will answer all my work emails by 10 a.m. on Mondays. On Mondays. So you don't have to say that exactly, but I have seen colleagues who have hit very busy seasons of their work because of the work that they do. And they may have an outgoing message on their email saying that I'm receiving a high volume of emails at this time, or I'm working on this particular project and I may not get to your email, in a time, this week or in the next few days, or I will get to your email within a few days. You can craft something like that. That's you setting boundaries, but you're also communicating with people about what you need and how you can assist them. So that's really important. So 3 types of boundaries. We've been talking about this a little bit. There's physical, emotional, mental. The physical boundaries is truly like your space. You may have boundaries with hugging or just your space or even people using your items, and that's okay to communicate that. And of course, emotional, mental, whatever type of boundary you have that you need to set, it's okay to set that. It is okay to set boundaries. And identify your priorities, set and define them. We talked about priorities. Sometimes if you're not prioritizing appropriately, you may be the people that need you the most, or you say mean the most to you, or the projects that you say mean the most and are the most important are not getting done, or not getting done in a timely manner or with the effort that they deserve or need. So setting priorities and prioritizing them is super important. Learn to say no, learn to say if and then, take time off, turn off notifications, create built-in breaks to your day, even if that means just walking down the hall, if that's, or if you're working from home, if that means walking outside to the end of your block and back, just do something for a break. And that's going to look different for different people. Different people need different things. So figure out what works for you. And then communicate clearly. And also know, even when you communicate clearly about your boundaries, it is possible that you might get some pushback. So be ready for the pushback. Think it through a little bit. Maybe or anticipate you're going to get pushback because you know this person's personality, or you know the workload, or you know whatever the situation is. And sometimes you may not get that pushback that you're anticipating. But nonetheless, think about, if they say this, I will say this. If this is expected, I will express this desire or this need. So what's on your plate? What is on your plate? When you're thinking about boundaries, sometimes it's helpful to just pause and think, gosh, I need to set some boundaries. I need to make some changes, but what's on my plate? What am I doing? What am I responsible for example? So when you think about what's on your plate and you're trying to set healthy boundaries, you can think about, what things do I need to let go of? What things do I need not to be doing? It could be something you need to delegate, for example. Maybe it's a project you're participating in that you really don't need to be participating in. They have 5 people helping. They don't need 5. They really need 3. So if you said, you know what, you guys have a lot of people helping with this, I'm going to step back and let you guys handle this, and I'm going to work on some other things. So something as simple and small as evaluating what you're working on, where you're helping, where you're assisting, and think, do I even need to be helping? The other thing is, what can you limit? Sometimes you can't quit things, but you can limit it. And limiting, that's sometimes within your control, and sometimes you have to negotiate that a bit. So in your boundaries, what can you limit with your time, your involvement, your activities? Sometimes maybe you're watching too much TV and you need to be working out some of that time because that's part of your stress relief and self-care. Some of your social media or time with family and friends. What can you limit? If you're the type of person that likes or tends to be on the phone calls a lot, especially social, maybe you can cut that back a little bit. Other meetings that you can limit. Are there, does this group meet every single month, for example? Do you need to be there every single month? Or can you watch the playback later if that's something that's available? So what can you limit? And you can explain to the leader that I'm not going to be able to come to that particular one. Or look at the agenda. What's on the agenda? Oh, they're covering those items. Okay, I don't need to be there for that. You may need to limit even like reoccurring meetings attendance. Limit interruptions, outings. Sometimes you got to say no, not now. So what can you limit? Is there anything you can pause? Pause is kind of like stop, but stop for a temporary. Is there something you're participating in that you're working on that you need to say, you know what, I can't, I normally help with this particular council or committee, but I need to not be on this council or this committee this particular semester or for the next 6 weeks until I can get past this particular project or activity or what have you. So that's something you're pausing it. You're still a part of it, but you're saying, I'm going to pause that. And let's bring it home, more practical. Maybe you can pause answering emails throughout the day. And you can simply check emails first thing in the morning, first hour or two, and then don't check it again until lunchtime or after lunchtime. And then check it again at the end of the day. That's a thought, right? Also, when you pause, take a true break. Like, don't take a break and say, I'm going to go sit outside and I'm going to read over my notes for work. That is not a real break. So we all need to take moments of breaks. We all need to pause. We need to pull back some. We need to take time off. And when you're off, don't work. And one way you can help ease your stress about that, again, is making sure you've talked to everyone you need to talk to about, if while I'm gone, if this happened, this is what you need to do. Or here's, contact this person. They can do this particular aspect of my work if that comes up while I'm out. So when you put all those plans into work and have backup plans, that helps you to take the pause you need to be off. Even if it's just one day in the work week, you're off just because you're off and you need it to be. You feel like you have things covered, and other people feel supported because you have told them, here's the plan when I'm not here. Also, what can you delegate? Do you have to do everything? Or do you have to handle every detail of a project? Maybe there's aspects of it that someone else can do, certain pieces. Let them do those pieces. Sometimes we don't delegate because we see our colleagues and we feel like they have a lot going on. We feel like they're so busy. And because they're so busy, I hate to ask them to do something. So if that's your reasoning, think about that. And then evaluate and adjust your methods. Use technology to help you when setting boundaries. Technology is our friend in those cases. It could be something as an outgoing message with multiple emails of who to contact about things. So technology can be your friend. You could put things on your calendar so that, people that need to see that, your teammates can see what you're doing or see that you're working on a certain project or see that you're out for what have you, vacation or whatever. That's another way, a very basic everyday way you can use technology to help you. So when it comes to boundaries, keep in mind, it's super important to be intentional and to communicate what you need and to learn what others expect of you. And remind yourself that you can't do it all. So because we can't do it all, we have to decide where our time is going to be spent. Where are we going to spend our time, our energy, our efforts? Because you cannot do everything all the time for everyone. So a few healthy tips to manage your work-life boundaries. Speak up for yourself. Speak up about what you need. Show up for work. Be present. Show up with your team. Lead up. Show by example how to set boundaries by not answering those emails in the middle of the night or when you're on vacation. Fess up when you make a mistake. If you need help or if something goes wrong with a project or whatever, you make a mistake, just fess up to it. And then work up, set those boundaries that you need at work around work projects and delegate when needed, ask for help when needed. And ultimately, as you're working through boundaries, being very intentional, don't give up. It is a work in progress. It is something you have to work on your entire life. You will never not need to adjust and reevaluate your boundaries. So when you miss the mark or you say, oh gosh, I used to have great boundaries in this area, I don't know what happened, that may be a time to pause and reevaluate. So thinking about boundaries, here's a few questions for you to ponder and think through for yourself. What are the lack of boundaries costing me? If I don't have boundaries, what is that costing me in the areas of physical, mental, emotional health or well-being? What can happen when you don't set healthy boundaries? And then how does this impact your flexibility for your hybrid and remote workers? So when you don't set those good boundaries, a lack of boundaries can lead to burnout. I mentioned quite a few things that it could lead to. It can lead to anxiety, stress, frustration, anger, grief. It can lead to a lot of things. But not setting boundaries, if you stretch yourself so thin, you might find yourself feeling burned out. And some signs that you may be experiencing burnout include exhaustion, isolation, having escape fantasies like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to get off at like 5 o'clock. You're counting down, you're cleaning up, and you just can't wait to not be working or helping with that project. And then irritability. People can't ask you basic questions. You're snapping at people. You're frustrated. So being irritable is a sign that you may be experiencing some burnout. Frequent illness. Maybe all of a sudden you just keep getting sick. Maybe your immune system is kind of taking a hit because maybe you're not getting enough sleep, or you're so stressed out mentally, that you just can't sleep, or you're so tired, you wake up tired. So these are signs that you may be experiencing some burnout. And then how do you prevent it? There's a lot of things that you can do. This is a short list, but consider exercise. And exercise may mean simply taking a 15-minute walk 2 times a day. It could be taking, an exercise class. It could be yoga. It could be biking. It could be meditation, mindfulness, all kinds of ways to kind of help with your well-being. And then eat a balanced diet. Don't be so busy that you can't eat. So figure out, if you're busy in the morning, you feel like you don't have time for breakfast, maybe you just eat a half a cup of yogurt and, a half a banana or something. Make it easy. Make it work for you. In the evening, make sure you're also drinking plenty of water throughout the day. So those are just things to really think. And you can talk to a nutritionist or a dietitian, and they can assist you with, based on your schedule and what you have going on in your life, what are some good things to eat to keep you healthy? Have a handful of almonds, at 2 o'clock, for example. So there's things to think about. And then practice good sleep habits. Figure out what will help you go to sleep. Sometimes listening to some music, listening to ocean sounds, maybe listening to a book on tape or something to help your mind kind of calm down. But you have to figure out, trial and error can be your friend. Just try a few things and see what works. And of course, always ask for help when needed. So 10 ways to combat burnout. First of all, learn the signs and symptoms of burnout, and then identify if you are experiencing any of them. The fact that you can identify it within yourself, that's a really good way to combat burnout, because then you can set up a plan, right? A plan of action to address it. Rest and recovery, really important. Give yourself time to adequately rest and adequately recover. So if you've been working on a particular project and you worked 60 hours this week, you worked early, you worked late, it was just a big project. Maybe it was a time commitment, or maybe you were short 2 people on your staff or something. Okay, you need to recover from that. You can't stay at that rate of work forever. So think about, okay, rest and recovery. Workload, managing your workload can help you. And then, asking some critical questions of yourself. Am I doing more than I should be? Can I scale back? Again, am I doing things I need to delegate? So forth. Workplace habits. Thinking about the things that you do at work. What do you do? Do you start early, work late? Do you commit to a lot of things that you don't have time to do? Are you missing that opportunity to say, no, not now, or I can do this if and then that works out? So coping skills, learn some coping skills. Figure out, how can I cope with this? What do I personally need for my well-being, from mental, emotional, physical? What do I need to cope? Exercise. And what, really a good workout exercise, or even 15 minutes of strenuous something, exercise. Switch off. You can combat burnout by literally turning off your phone, going away from work, or turning off your computer, like switching everything off. And try to do that every day. Every day. not say, if you say, oh, well, I get to switch off on the weekends only, that that can lead to burnout if you're not switching off at the end of every workday. Think about what that means and what helps you switch off. Is it a favorite TV show that helps you switch off? Is it music? Is it running? Is it talking to a person? Whatever helps you switch off. Some people say they switch off when they walk, when they're working on site and they walk from their office or their workspace to their vehicle. That's their switch off time. Some people say they switch off when they're driving home or riding the bus home. They may be listening to an audible book or something. That is their switch off time. So figure out what helps you switch off. Get the support that you need. Monitor your environment. What is it in your environment that may be stressing you out or causing you to burn out? What do you need to adjust? Some people like diffusers. Some people like music. I mean, whatever works. And then, of course, always think about your values. How is what you're doing positively or negatively impacting your values? What you say is important to you. So check in with your energy. Burnout comes with subtle signs, but you can look for those signs and early, catch it early. Also, when you're checking in with your energy, kind of notice how you feel on a regular basis. Notice when you're driving in to work, if that's what your schedule looks like. Notice your thoughts. Notice if your heart is kind of pounding a little bit. Notice if your attitude is changing because now you're approaching work. What's happening with your energy? So one thing with this one, as you move through your day, it's important to take notice where you spend your time and your energy. If you realize that something is not worth the gift of your time and your energy, you can always redirect. Redirect. It's not too late to change, to make some adjustments. So a few quick tips for supervisors. If you're a supervisor and you're watching this or listening, how you can assist your team in terms of avoiding burnout and helping them manage them and have some boundaries, healthy boundaries. Encourage your team to take care of themselves. Lead by example. Encourage them to take breaks. Have realistic expectations of timelines and things that are done that need to be done. Encourage them to pause on one project so that they can work on another project versus working on 3 projects at the same time. You proactively can tell them, okay, I know I'd really need this at the last minute, like in 2 days. I know you're working on this. I'm going to extend your deadline for this project till next week so that you can help me with this. That can mentally release a whole lot of stress for your team. Also, have a process for changing work schedules and locations outside of the routine. Have a process. For example, have guidelines around that. If you're going to ask them to, change their work location, tell them, I'm going to give you a 48-hour notice. I'm not going to ask you the night before. Just have that can be of assistance. Regularly check on your team's mental health and well-being. Simply ask, how are you doing? If you know that things are going on with their life and they're okay with at least giving you some minimum information, ask, how is your fill in the blank? Or how is your trip to fill in the blank? Or I know you were having a headache yesterday. Are you okay from that? Just show some interest. So it's okay to give yourself permission to set boundaries. It is okay to say no. It's okay to say not now. It's okay to say if and then. It is okay. So remind yourself it's okay to set boundaries, healthy boundaries for myself. You'll always need to evaluate your boundaries. Taking care of yourself and your needs is a must do and not only a need to do. That's extremely important to keep in mind. It's important. We know we need to take care of ourselves, but sometimes you may find yourself saying, I need to do this, I need to do that, and not actually doing it. So can you switch that to say, I must do this? That might help you set some boundaries. And then make some small adjustments. We're not saying make this huge adjustment overnight. If you've built a habit of checking emails every night past 8 o'clock and you're on the emails and you're calling people on the weekend and doing that, maybe you start by not doing the weekend calls or checking emails. Maybe you start by not working past, on at least 3 days a week, you're not going to work past 6, for example. So try to make a few small adjustments and keep adding to them. So here's some things to think about when it comes to mantras. Some people like quotes, some people like songs, whatever works for you to help you to take care of you. Here's one. Instead of doing it all, I choose what I do. Instead of doing it all, I choose what I do. I can't do it all. It's okay to do less. And some people may want to cringe when they think of that. Do less, do less doesn't mean slack off. Do less doesn't mean not doing your job. We're saying don't overdo. You may already be overdoing it. That may mean say no to some voluntary project that you're very interested in, but you literally don't have the time to do it unless you work late every night. So it's okay to do, not to do it all. And in fact, it's okay to do less. So thank you for joining me for this presentation at the University of Kentucky offered by the HR Office of Work Life. And just want you to remember that healthy boundaries are essential to building good relationships and managing your work life.